Welcome to the debate. When we want to know if it's going to rain tomorrow, we don't just gather a group of brilliant people, put them in a conference room, and ask them to collectively imagine the weather.
Right. No, that would be ridiculous.
Exactly. We rely on a strict scientific method, we gather atmospheric data, we look at historical meteorological models, and we extrapolate mathematically.
It's grounded in empirical reality.
It is. But when we try to forecast something infinitely more complex, like the socioeconomic weather of human civilization 30 years from now, specifically looking at the future of work and automation in the 2050 horizon, that rigorous scientific approach suddenly becomes, well, a massive battleground.
It absolutely does. Because predicting the future of human society isn't like tracking a low-pressure system moving across the Atlantic. Today, we are analyzing the scientific methodology used in forecasting.
Right.
We're specifically looking at a really fascinating foresight study conducted by 13 interdisciplinary researchers, alongside the broader critical literature on how artificial intelligence will actually impact human employment over the next few decades.
And the central question we're exploring today is, how do we build reliable scenarios for that future? Which methodological approach provides a more valid scientific foundation? I take the position that bibliometrics, the quantitative analysis of existing literature and data, must be the primary foundation of future studies to prevent forecasting from devolving into speculative myth-making.
And I represent the contrasting position that qualitative methods, like structured brainstorming, are the essential engines of foresight, as strictly data-driven approaches cannot predict unprecedented cause and consequence relationships.
Well, let's just look at exactly what happens when you let imagination override empirical reality, because the history of predicting automation is frankly riddled with wild, almost embarrassing discrepancies.
Here we go.
No, really. Take the famous 2017 study by Frey and Osborne. You've probably seen the dramatic headlines it generated. They predicted this apocalyptic scenario where a staggering 47% of jobs in the US were at high risk of disappearing through automation.
It was very loud paper, yes.
But then you look at Ernst and colleagues in 2016. They surveyed the exact same technological landscape and concluded that only 9% of jobs were automatable in an economically viable way.
That is a staggering difference. 47% versus 9%?
Right, and it demands an explanation. Why that massive gap? It really comes down to methodology. Frey and Osborne looked at what individual tasks could, in principle, be automated. They relied on a theoretical imagination of machine capability. But jobs aren't just isolated tasks. Let's say you're a retail manager. Yes, auditing inventory is a task a machine can do. But de-escalating a conflict with an irate customer, or noticing an employee is struggling with a personal issue and adjusting their schedule, those are deeply human tasks woven into the exact same job.
Which is a crucial distinction. Absolutely.
Exactly. Ernst looked at the empirical complexity of whole jobs, not just isolated tasks. They also looked at economic viability. Because, just because a robot can flip a burger doesn't mean it's cheaper than paying a teenager to do it. Accurate forecasting has to be anchored in trustworthy data and established literature.
Right, but...
Wait, just to finish the thought. Without bibliometrics to level our knowledge and gather the true state of the art, researchers fall victim to the same unchecked imagination that currently plagues artificial general intelligence, or AGI, research. It leads to modern myths like apocalyptic AI or the technology singularity, rather than rigorous scientific forecasting.
Well, I come at it from a different way. Empirical data, like the Arndt study, is incredibly useful as a baseline. But predicting the year 2050 requires generating novel events that simply haven't happened yet.
Sure.
Which means they cannot possibly exist in any published paper. If we look at the foresight study at the heart of our discussion today, the core engine of their methodology wasn't just reading past publications. It was a mandatory 5-hour brainstorming session.
5 hours of brainstorming?
Yes, and this wasn't just some casual chat around a water cooler. It was guided by strict Osborne guidelines for idea generation, meaning they had to deliberately defer judgment, encourage wild ideas, and build on each other's thoughts without immediate academic skepticism.
Which, to be honest, sounds like a recipe for science fiction.
But it's not, because of who was in the room. They utilized 13 experts across highly diverse fields: computer engineering, economics, public management, architecture, urbanism. It was through this qualitative human deduction that they actually produced the future scenarios.
By just talking it out?
By methodically identifying completely new, non-obvious concepts, like the necessity for more flexibility in the employment contract. Foresight is fundamentally about discovering the primary and secondary consequences of an event. A search engine indexing past publications cannot make those cognitive leaps. You need the human mind to bridge that gap.
I get the appeal of the brainstorming approach, I really do, but there is a massive vulnerability there. The source material explicitly points out that most of the contributions in the field of artificial general intelligence rely, and this is a direct quote, more on imagination than on trustworthy data.
I know the quote, yes.
Relying heavily on brainstorming for forecasting is like trying to navigate a ship using the crew's collective imagination of where the rocks might be, rather than consulting the nautical charts we've already meticulously mapped out through bibliometrics.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go for it.
I have to push back on that ship analogy because you are conflating unstructured fantasy with rigorous foresight methodology. Let's stick with your ship for a second. Bibliometrics is brilliant for showing us the wake behind the ship. It shows us exactly where we have been and the current trajectory of the water we just cut through.
It shows us the shape of the seabed, too.
But the wake cannot predict a new storm forming on the horizon in front of us. And the brainstorming conducted in this study was not unstructured fantasy. It was systematically followed by a methodology called the futures wheel.
Which is a graphical method for charting consequences, yes?
Right. But let's unpack how it actually works in practice, because the mechanism is what makes it scientific. Imagine the center of this wheel is a novel event they brainstormed. Say, algorithmic AI entirely manages local city zoning by 2050.
Okay.
A purely bibliometric approach stops there because it hasn't happened. But with the futures wheel, these experts draw the first spoke, the primary consequence. The computer engineer says, okay, the algorithm will naturally optimize for traffic flow and energy efficiency.
Sure, logical step.
Then the urbanist draws the secondary spoke. If it optimizes for traffic, it will likely zone commercial centers much further away from residential hubs, keep local roads clear. Then the economist draws the third spoke. That drops residential property values in former mixed-use neighborhoods, changing the tax base.
Right, cascading effects.
Exactly. They're establishing strict logical cause and consequence relationships. It takes a dynamic friction of different disciplines in the same room to map a cascade like that.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. That interdisciplinary friction is valuable, certainly, but to map those consequences accurately without veering off into absurdity, you need precise, scientifically valid definitions to serve as your building blocks.
Okay.
A brainstorming group, no matter how diverse or rigorous, cannot invent robust taxonomic frameworks on the fly. Let's look at how we define the most crucial issue of the future, the human-machine dynamic. Are we looking at human mechanization or human empowerment? The literature provides a very specific taxonomy by Murray and colleagues regarding conjoined agency.
The 4 forms of agency.
Precisely, assisting, augmenting, arresting, and automating technologies. And this isn't just academic theory, it fundamentally changes how we view the workplace. This framework categorizes technology based on who holds the agency over what to do, which is the action selection, versus how to do it, which is the protocol development.
It's a brilliant way to break it down. I agree.
It is. And let's bring it down to a practical level. Think about your own job. If you use a basic spell checker, you decide what to write and how to write it. The AI is merely assisting you.
Right.
If you tell an AI to draft a legal brief based on your specific arguments, you decide what the goal is, but the AI figures out how to construct the sentences. You retain the action selection. The technology is augmenting you. You are empowered.
But it goes the other way too.
Right, the dark side of the taxonomy. Look at an Uber driver. The algorithm dictates what they need to do, go to this address, pick up this person, but the human figures out how to physically drive the car there.
The AI has taken over the action selection?
Exactly. The technology is arresting, the human is being mechanized. And finally, automating is when the AI decides both what to do and how to do it, like a fully autonomous vehicle. This is a highly nuanced, empirically derived framework.
Yes, it is.
You can't just brainstorm your way into that level of precision. You have to use bibliometrics to extract these frameworks so your foresight is grounded in the actual mechanics of narrow AI. Because the literature proves that, by design, high-level intentions will always need to be defined by humans.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that while the literature gives us this neat taxonomy, it is entirely silent on which of those 4 agencies will actually dominate everyday life by 2050?
Well, it gives us the tools to track it.
Murray's framework gives us the definitions, yes, but how does an arresting technology, where the machine dictates the daily goals, actually impact social welfare systems? How does an augmenting technology reshape the public education sector?
That's what we project from the data.
But the data isn't there yet. The source material details how the researchers divided into 5 specialized groups: computerization, employment, education, social welfare, and economy. Bibliometrics gives you the definition of conjoined agency. Absolutely. But you require the brainstorming across those 5 groups to cross-pollinate those trends. Just think about it. The existing data hasn't covered the intersection of arresting AI and future public management. You need the human experts to actively construct that scenario.
I don't disagree that human experts are required to apply the frameworks. My issue is that when qualitative brainstorming is treated as the primary engine, you simply cannot trust the final output because of psychological bias.
Bias? These are experts.
Experts are human. Let's talk about the vulnerability of those 13 people in the room. Human beings are inherently biased by cultural panic. We are dealing with a public discourse deeply infected by what the literature calls the myth of full autonomy and human self-deification.
Right. That bizarre cultural mix of apocalyptic fear and the immortal hope of the singularity.
Yes. In 2017, a Eurobarometer survey found that 72% of Europeans believe robots and AI steal people's jobs.
Public perception is definitely skewed, I'll give you that.
It's massively skewed. So if 72% of the population hold a belief that the literature proves is fundamentally flawed, how can you trust a qualitative brainstorming session not to be infected by that same cultural myth?
Well, the experts read the same news and watch the same movies as everyone else. Bibliometrics acts as a sterile objective filter to eliminate this psychological bias.
Okay, I think calling bibliometrics an objective filter is giving the literature way too much credit for neutrality. The literature itself is highly biased and contradictory.
Oh, come on.
No, you pointed it out yourself earlier. Frey and Osborne said 47% of jobs are at risk. Arns said 9%. In 2020, a European Commission report by Kleinert and others systematically studied automation from 1995 to 2015.
And what did they find? They found it actually had a positive impact on manufacturing employment in certain sectors because automation lowered costs, increased consumer demand, and created different types of maintenance and logistics jobs.
Which proves my point. The literature tracks reality.
But it's chaotic. A generic survey by Barbieri highlighted that when you actually consider the difficulties of implementing automation in the real world, the predictions become far less pessimistic. The literature on job replacement is a chaotic mix of differing methodologies and levels of analysis. It is definitely not a pristine reservoir of truth.
It is mitigated, yes, but those mitigations are documented, peer-reviewed, and transparent. When a paper's methodology is flawed, subsequent literature corrects it. That is the scientific method working as intended.
And the foresight methodology they used explicitly replicates that self-correcting scientific method, but they do it in real time through dynamic group interaction.
By talking?
By structured interaction. How do they mitigate the cultural panic you're worried about? Through the strict orchestration of the workflow. They used a software framework called Tiamat.
Right, the collaborative foresight support system.
Yes, but what does that actually mean for the people in the room? Tiamat isn't just a digital whiteboard where people throw sticky notes. It offers complete traceability for intermediary results. It prevents the loudest voice or the most popular bias from dominating the room.
How so?
In their 8th session, after generating all these potential future events, the moderators used Tiamat to force the participants to develop 3 distinct scenarios: the best outcome, the worst outcome, and the most likely outcome for each event.
I see.
Before anyone could vote, Tiamat forced them to log their rationale, creating an audit trail of their thought process. They were constantly checking each other's consistency across disciplines. The presence of moderators and the mandatory cross-examination is what strips away the cultural panic you're referring to.
I hear that, but I'm still not convinced by that line of reasoning. Because at the end of the day, you're still relying on the internal consistency of a closed group of 13 people.
13 very qualified people.
Sure, but even with the Tiamat software providing traceability, if the foundational inputs aren't rigorously bounded by the state-of-the-art literature gathered in earlier sessions, the most likely outcome they vote on might just be the most popular cognitive bias in the room.
And disagree.
This is why the distinction between narrow AI and artificial general intelligence is so vital here. Narrow AI aims at efficiently solving complex problems. AGI aims at reproducing human intelligence capabilities.
Right.
The data overwhelmingly tells us AGI is still in its infancy. But if a brainstorming group doesn't rigorously anchor themselves to that bibliometric fact, they might spend all 5 hours mapping out the secondary consequences of an AGI singularity that the National Science and Technology Council says is highly unlikely to happen anytime soon.
But notice how the study was actually structured to prevent exactly what you are fearing. The very first thing they did between sessions 1 and 2, before they ever sat down to brainstorm, was a bibliometric literature search. Why? Precisely to level the knowledge among the interdisciplinary participants. The computer engineers shared papers with the social welfare expert, ensuring everyone understood the technical reality of narrow AI versus the Hollywood myth of AGI.
So you're admitting they needed the literature?
I am not arguing that we throw the data out. I am arguing that bibliometrics is the foundation, but brainstorming is the house. You cannot live in a foundation. The events they found in the literature were just the starting nodes for the future's wheel. It was the qualitative methodology that took those historical nodes and built a three-dimensional scenario for 2050.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame the architecture differently. I would say bibliometrics is not just the foundation, it is the load-bearing structure of the entire exercise.
Okay.
The moment you step outside the parameters established by the literature, you risk structural collapse. We must remember that the real, tangible threat identified in the literature isn't human replacement by autonomous robots. That's a myth.
Agreed.
The real challenge is work alienation, shifts in decision-making power, and fairness in the workplace. These are granular sociological shifts that require precise data to track.
Exactly. And how do you predict shifts in fairness and decision-making power 30 years from now? By looking at past data on fairness?
By extrapolating trends, yes.
But society is evolving entirely too rapidly for that. The qualitative generation of best, worst, and most likely scenarios allows us to anticipate how new technologies might alter the psychological contract of employment. Bibliometrics tells us that technology can exercise intentionality over protocols. Brainstorming tells us how human beings might actually react when a specific algorithm starts dictating the daily schedule of a public management worker in 2050.
Well, as we draw this toward a close, it's clear we are looking at two very different philosophies of scientific methodology and forecasting.
Definitely.
To summarize my position, I firmly believe that bibliometrics must be the primary anchor of any future studies. As we've seen from the wild historical discrepancies between Frey and Osborne's 47% prediction versus Arndt's 9%, and the pervasive modern myths surrounding the technology singularity, human imagination is highly susceptible to cultural bias and panic.
Right.
By systematically indexing and analyzing peer-reviewed literature, we ensure our foresight is grounded in the actual mechanics of current narrow AI, preventing us from chasing apocalyptic ghosts.
And to summarize my view, data is indispensable, absolutely, but it is inherently backward-looking. Structured brainstorming, heavily supported by rigorous frameworks like the Futures Wheel and collaborative software like Tiamat, is the true engine of foresight. It is the only methodology that allows interdisciplinary minds to step beyond the constraints of past publications and map out the unprecedented societal, economic, and technological shifts that will define the year 2050.
Despite our different emphases, I think we both acknowledge a profound point of convergence here. The most robust foresight frameworks generalize as workflows that inherently combine these complementary methods.
For sure.
You need the bibliometrics to level the interdisciplinary knowledge base and establish the scientific state of the art.
Absolutely. Then you need the structured brainstorming to extrapolate from that knowledge base, ensuring that the scenarios are actually projecting into the unknown future rather than just summarizing the past. The profound complexity of how human agency and machine intentionality will interact over the next few decades demands both the strict rigor of the data and the structured imagination of the human mind.
It suggests there is so much more to explore in the methodology of how we understand tomorrow. We highly recommend our listeners dive deeper into the methodologies behind the dramatic headlines they read every day about the future of work.
Definitely. The next time you see a headline claiming robots will take half our jobs by the end of the decade, stop and ask yourself, how did they calculate that? Were they looking at isolated tasks or whole jobs? Did they rely on historical data or unstructured imagination?
Exactly. We leave it to you to decide whether you trust the safety of the historical nautical charts, or if you believe navigating to 2050 requires the crew to look up from the data and systematically imagine the storms ahead. Thank you for joining us.